Members of the public, councillors and officers who are joining us for today's meeting. Please be aware the council is live streaming this meeting direct to our YouTube channel. While the physical venue of the meeting is different to what we would have in a council chamber, we are endeavouring to keep to the usual meeting format as best as possible. There are, however, some key changes that I ought to highlight. Councillors looking to speak will be invited to do so by me as the chair in the usual manner, and you'll need to come to the nearest microphone at the front to speak, unless you have a microphone on your table. Please do not touch the microphone whenever possible. For councillors that have table microphones, the sound technician will be unmuting your microphones when you're invited to speak. If councillors have any concerns about hearing or seeing others in the meeting, please let the chair or a council officer know straight away. If anyone uses hearing aids, please make sure to connect to the hearing loop for the best audio quality. I must also run through a few key health and safety points for those physically present in the meeting room. Face masks must be worn at all times except when you're speaking in a microphone or unless you have a medical exemption. The fire exits are via the main entrance you entered the venue through or the disabled access entry point. The assembly point is out on West Down Road to the east of the building, and if you're able to, up towards the unmade section of Wilmington Road. In the venue, please limit your touching of shared surfaces as best as possible, though I can confirm that tables, chairs and other surfaces and the facilities have been cleaned ahead of the meeting. Please remain seated unless you're invited to speak or need to take a comfort break. The toilet facilities are by the main entrance doors. When moving around the room, please maintain your distance from others. I would ask that participants looking to leave the meeting wait until the end of an agenda item to limit distractions for other participants. Voting will be done by show of hands. Please make sure that your hand is clearly lifted and keep it raised until the chair has called the vote. If the meeting goes into a confidential session, a short 2-minute break will be held to allow members of the public to leave and to stop the live stream feed. Now we have members of the public present and via Zoom. Members of the public are now invited to participate in one of 3 ways: remotely via Zoom, physically in the meeting by submitting a written statement to be read out. Those members of the public looking to participate via Zoom will be invited to do so first at that relevant point of the agenda. Zoom users are reminded to keep yourself muted until you're invited to speak. The technical host will then prompt you when it's your turn to speak via the chat function, so please keep an eye on your Zoom chat function. Members of the public physically in the meeting room will be invited to speak next. Please raise your hand to show that you wish to speak, and the chair will invite you to come to a microphone in the order that you have indicated to speak. Again, please refrain from touching the microphone. Finally, a council officer will read out any written statements that have been submitted. Public participation is limited to a maximum of 4 minutes per person and must be relating to an item on the agenda. You do not need to state your name when you start speaking if you don't wish to, but we ask you to clearly state which agenda item you are speaking about on the business of the agenda. You do not need to state your name, but you can if you choose to. To all present, please remember to show respect to others in the meeting and avoid interrupting where possible to enable others to follow the meeting. If any councillor feels concerned about any aspect of the meeting or discussion, please clearly state point of order. The chair will then gesture for you to elaborate. If anyone is felt to be behaving unacceptably, they can be ejected from the meeting by resolution. Thank you for listening, and on behalf of the council, I would like to thank everyone for attending this town council meeting. Thank you. Now we come to the agenda, and do we have any apologies for absence?
Yes, Chair. We have apologies from Councillor Olivia Honeyman and Councillor Richard Honeyman, who both have a prior personal commitment. We have apologies from Councillor Webb, who has a work commitment, and also Councillor Adeniji, who has a prior commitment as well. That's the apologies we've received. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We move on to item 2, disclosure of interest, to deal with any disclosure by members of any disclosable pecuniary interests and interests other than pecuniary interests as defined under the Seaford Town Council Code of Conduct and Localism Act 2011 in relation to matters on the agenda. Are there any disclosures of interest? I should disclose one for the item Agenda 17 as I'm a member of the Seaford Baptist Church. So no other interest disclosed. Okay, let's move on to item 3, public participation. I understand we have one person present by Zoom. So if there are members of the public who wish to speak, do you please raise your hand to indicate you want to do so, and we'll then call you to one of these 2 microphones in the order you indicate. Can I look to Georgia? Is anyone on Zoom wanting to speak? Anyone in the room wishes to speak? Clark, has anyone submitted written statements to be read?
No.
So I think then that brings us to the end of item 3 and public participation. Now we come on to item 4, minutes of the meeting. To note the following minutes, approving and not approving, or not approving recommendations as required. So 4.1 is the full council meeting on the 20th of May. Someone like to propose they be accepted? Councillor Borman, someone second that. Councillor Meek, those in favour? That's carried. The full council ordinary meeting on the 20th of May, someone to propose that? Councillor Mark Brown, seconded. Councillor, yes. Everton, sorry, I've just lost the name of Councillor. No, I got your name. Councillor Bill Payne. Right, yeah, I've got the name. Sorry, that was painful, but I got there. Okay, the third one, 4.3, planning and highways. Chair, I'd like to propose that. Seconded by yes, Councillor Edson. Those in favour? Carried. We come on to item 5, Seaford Head Historic Fort, but unfortunately the person who was due to make a presentation isn't available tonight, and neither is the presentation itself. Now, given that item 5 requires us to note some recommendations and possibly give delegated authority, would not be possible to do that without hearing the presentation. So I propose from the chair that we defer this item to a meeting which is convenient for the presenters. Someone second that? Councillor Rutland, those in favour? Okay, that one's deferred. Thank you. Now we're coming now to item 6, which is the Mayor's Update Report. Now, I'd like to spend just a few minutes just to introduce my themes for the year, because this is the first meeting where I've had an opportunity to do that since the annual meeting. Now, I came to Seaford intending a quiet retirement, and instead I'm thanking you for appointing me to be Mayor for a second term. Thank you for the confidence you've placed in me for a second municipal year, which I hope during this year we will emerge from lockdowns and social isolation. I look forward to cooperating with Councillor Jean Cash as our Deputy Mayor, and I want to publicly congratulate her for improving on last year's very successful Seaford Secret Gardens by envisaging and encouraging last weekend's Over the Rainbow sponsored walk, working with Seaford Rotary. Good to have an officers team there, as well as members team and several members watching from the sidelines. The Mayoress is still with me, and I'm pleased that the Reverend Andy Machin, who you met earlier in this meeting, agreed to serve as Mayor's Chaplain for another year. Town Crier of Seaford, Peter White, and I make a good double act, and we look forward to more actual engagements this year. I met with Joe, our young Mayor, last week, and with Erin, our Deputy Young Mayor, and again I hope we can accept invitations to public events together. I look forward to a full year alongside our Town Clerk and his team of officers. I want to use this opportunity to briefly set out my hopes and intentions for the mayoral year. Last year I set out a theme of stronger together, and it's important to carry that through into this year. My intention was to have some social events between councillors before we came to a COVID halt after one picnic in the Seaford Barnyard. I hope there'll be more opportunities to do this year. We are one council, members and officers together, distinct responsibilities and duties, but we're elected or employed to serve our town in the best way that we can. Mutual respect and cooperation are the foundations for that stronger together approach. A significant approach in this year will be in the role of Mayor with charities. At the start of the year, officers drew my attention to the NACO, the National Association of Civic Officers, guidance that best practice was now for mayors to support fundraising efforts by the charities themselves, but not to engage in fundraising for them. Now, the Over the Rainbow walk last weekend is a good example of that new approach, where the money the charities raised went directly into their funds. Support Our Seaford Charities, an event on the Martello Fields on 5 September, which is organised by 5 of our town's service organisations, will follow the same approach. Whatever the charities raise on their stalls, they keep. 37 charities, not-for-profit organisations have joined the Mayor's Charities Initiative and have been offered free of charge charity stalls and pitches on that date. Now, at the end of the last municipal year, the Mayor's Charities Fund held £485, and dividing it into 37 equal donation cheques would have been very time-consuming and will result in small amounts donated to each one. As there will be no fundraising by the Mayor this year, my intention is to distribute that £485 on the 5th of September by way of a cash prize draw. With so many of our local charities urgently needing money, it's my firmly held view that what we have should be distributed. There's no simple way to pick just a few from the 37, and it would still be small donations. Each charity or not-for-profit taking up a pitch on the day is entered in the cash prize draw, and after a public draw, the 3 winners are announced and will get their money as a cheque the following week. Announcing this is to take place in advance of the event will support the service organisations who are promoting the event and be an added incentive for charities and not-for-profit organisations to join in. Now, I'm hoping for real face-to-face civic events this year with the Deputy Mayor, Mayoress, Young Mayor, Deputy Young Mayor, Mayor's Chaplain, Town Crier. I look forward to accepting invitations to represent Seaford at events organised by the Lord Lieutenant, the High Sheriff, and by neighbouring mayors and council chairs. I also look forward to inviting these VIPs to events here in Seaford. Our civic service and our Mayor's Carol service, which will be here in Seaford Baptist Church, are just 2 of them. I do hope that our Remembrance Sunday service can go ahead at our War Memorial this year, and that the Commonwealth Remembrance can also be a face-to-face service the following Tuesday. There might even be fairs, fetes, and business openings for us. In closing, and yes, I know those are the words you've been hoping to hear for a while. In closing, environment and climate change initiatives will be important this year. Returning to my Stronger Together theme, whether directly elected or employed, our purpose is to support and improve our town, its environment, our community, our businesses, and improving their income from the staycationers we're expecting. We are definitely stronger together as town and town council. I finish there. Does anyone have questions? Nope. So the agenda item 6A, the recommendation is the council is recommended to note the contents of the report. Someone propose you're content to note the contents? Councillor Borman, Councillor Edson seconds. All those in favour? That's noted. Thank you. Now we move on to 6B. And 6B is the report of the newly elected young mayor. Now, I met Joe when he came to visit us at the Rainbow Walk on Sunday, and I believe that over the course of the year he'll be spending more time with us, we'll be more confident. And also what I've asked for him to do for us is to tell us more about what the young people of the town want of us and how they see us, to be that engagement with the town. But for now, I'll simply read the report he's handed to us so far. I was just going to begin by reading my name is Joe, but I should begin by saying his name is Joe, and he looks forward to working with everyone this year. A bit about him. He plays lots of sports and have done my whole life. He enjoys rugby, running. He's participated in many other sports, from trampolining to sailing. He's always lived in Seaford and has been part of various clubs such as Scouts and the Cricket Club. He's helped out with the New Haven Peacehaven Seaford Lions Club at their fundraising events, including the Seaford Half Marathon, the Donkey Derby, and Santa's Sleigh in Peacehaven. He's currently a volunteer with the Junior Seaford Striders Group as part of his DFE award. This year, while he's young mayor, he would like to support the Wolo Foundation as a charity, and he believes that the support they give to local families who are dealing with cancer is personal and practical. He feels this is a really unique opportunity and something that isn't widely offered. and he's currently exploring fundraising ideas and events for his year. And that is the report of the young mayor to this first meeting. I will ask you, Councillor Brown. Yeah, the initial stand for We Only Live Once, and it's a charity that supports, I think we could say, young people at end of life. So it's yes, it's a charity that's, I think, becoming well known in the town now. I think anyone who would like to pass messages to Joe, I think emails to Young Mayor at or messages to Sue, they'll go on to him, would be a good way to encourage him. And to he met a few councillors when he was at the Rainbow Walk, but good if we can get him joined in with us and encouraged to be part of things that we do. Okay, thank you. Sorry? Oh yes, sorry. So the recommendation from agenda item 6B is to note the contents of that report. So someone propose that for me? Councillor Edson, someone second that? Councillor Rutland, those in favour? Okay, that's noted, thank you.
Chair, I've got a point of order.
Yes?
It took us a few minutes to get all the Zoom connectivity going. So we do have a member of the public on Zoom who wants to participate, to say something to the meeting.
Yeah.
So would you mind rowing back to public participation?
I think we'll go back to...
And then through Georgia, we'll get him set up on the Zoom, able to speak.
Okay, so we're going to go back to item 3, public participation.
Yeah. And we have a member of the public on Zoom who wants to participate.
Okay, we look forward to hearing from the member of the public then.
Might take a minute or so to get this all to work, but we'll get there in a minute.
I can see a person's name who's joined us. Yeah. I wonder whether that person would like maybe to put something into the chat function that Georgia might read. Here we go.
Here he comes.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear us? We can't yet hear you.
If you just let him speak.
Hello. I don't know whether you can hear me. Is it okay
the sense of expectations built up very well, so thank you for joining us.
My name is Matt Pope. I'm an archaeologist based at...
So we heard that you're an archaeologist.
I can hear you. Can you hear me?
I heard you say, well, we can hear you now. I think if you keep on talking, we'll know.
Just tell him we can hear him.
I heard you're an archaeologist based at, and that's the last thing I heard.
Is it going to work? I'll come to you, George.
So we'll just have a quick technical discussion here in the chamber.
Okay.
Yeah, time delay.
All right, we now think it's a time delay. So if you just say what you want to say without stopping, and we'll hear it all. Please.
I think we're having some syncing issues, so I'm just going to talk. It means I'm not able to directly answer questions at the moment because we appear out of sync. But I'm going to just talk and hope everything's okay. I'm representing University College London, the Institute of Archaeology, but also Historic England, to a degree the South Downs National Park and the Sussex Wildlife Trust. We are all working together and focusing on Seaford Head and attempting to put together a project which will benchmark what is at risk from further cliff collapse on Seaford Head. Seaford Head contains a very internationally important prehistoric monument, which is a Bronze Age hill fort that encloses at the moment about 4 hectares of the top of the downs. There's also an earlier Bronze Age burial mound within the hill fort, and there's almost certainly going to be other later prehistoric archaeology within that area. Now, we know that over the last 5 years, there have been significant cliff falls, including a very significant cliff fall this year. These, of course, are following on from a long history of erosion and reduction in the size of the monument. But the cliff falls recently have shown that the monument is at huge risk of destruction and loss. And it has been a very long time since there has been a modern investigation of the hill fort to determine what is being lost. In the recent collapses over the last 5 years, we simply don't know what has been lost in terms of pits, post holes, structures, potentially burials, other historic assets which would have just fallen into the sea. So the project we're proposing to put together at the moment is not an intrusive archaeological project in the sense of excavation. It's a project to survey what is left of the monument and the cliff line 500 yards on either side of the monument. So we propose to try and characterize a kilometre-long strip of the cliff and the monument itself, survey all the earthworks, undertake geophysics, which will tell us where there are pits, where there are post holes, where there are settlement structures, and also at the same time to use drone photography to see what is exposed in the cliff. Amateur drone photography of a very high quality undertaken after the last collapse revealed pits and post holes exposed in the cliff edge. Now, no one will ever be able to go and recover those. It's just too dangerous, but we could make a record. Now, it would be possible for us to mount a very quick response using goodwill, using volunteer time, using the expertise of Historic England. But what we would like to do is fully cost this, apply for funding to Historic England to do it as a properly managed project. That is because we need to know what it costs, we need to have the expertise, we need to put in place the project structures if we need to do similar projects elsewhere on the Sussex coast, or for that matter, other similar coastlines under threat. So what we're hoping that we can build here is a project that not only creates benchmark data for Seaford Head and for the ongoing management and protection of Seaford Head, but also provides a model project for responding to rapidly changing coastlines. Because of course, you mentioned, the Mayor mentioned just now, climate change adaptation. This is, of course, going to accelerate with projected climate change models. The Seaford Head is a very important site, and it has been long neglected by the archaeological community. And we're hoping that we can put together a project that remedies that actually understands the risks to it, and can lead to not any kind of long-term protection, but a managed understanding of what's being lost, and potentially some rescue excavation in the medium to long-term future to actually mitigate that loss. We're looking to build the project structure and at the same time build partnerships, and we're hoping that Seaford Town Council can be a strong and supportive partner in this work. We're hoping in later phases as well to deliver public benefit, not only in explaining the hill fort's importance and bringing its awareness to a wider public, but by also getting public and communities and special interest groups involved in the archaeology of the hill and involved in the archaeology of the wider downland landscape. So I'll stop now. I'm happy to take any questions either verbally now, even though sinking may be a problem, or happy to take and be a conduit for questions to Historic England, to our other partners by email. And I'm hoping this is just the beginning of the conversation and just an introduction. And by the next time Seaford Town Council meet, we can give you a draft and costed project design and let you know whether it's been agreed by Historic England. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for joining us. Just for the benefit of the people in the council chamber, we're actually on agenda item 5, not agenda item 3. So we are there with the report on the Iron Age fort investigations. So does anyone in the chamber want to ask questions of our presenter? No, I think not. I think it was Dr. Pope, yes?
Yes.
Yeah, Dr. Pope, thank you for that offer. How you ended that saying that you want to have an ongoing engagement with us, and there's the opportunity for a more detailed proposal to our next meeting, which would be, I think, the August meeting. So I think that would be very helpful to us. So we have some recommendations in front of us now, and also we have an introductory report that was circulated before the meeting. I'm just giving people time to think of another question if they want to. No, I think we now have enough information to enable us to move forward. So unless you'd like, Dr. Vogt, to add any closing comments, I think we might stop at this point. You can stay in to listen to the discussion of the report. Just conscious of the delay, so I'll leave you a few seconds for the technology to catch up. No. Okay, let's move to the report recommendations then. We are recommended to note the report, to hear the presentation, which we have just had, to raise any questions, and importantly in recommendation 3, to give delegated authority to the town clerk in consultation with the mayor and chair of community services.
Yeah, no, I'll just sit here for a while in case anything arises. But again, thank you very much.
Okay, you're pleased to have you stay with us. So to give delegated authority, the town clerk consultation with the mayor and chair of community services to determine approval of the work to be undertaken, fully updating councillors as soon as possible. So I think we could take these three together. Someone like to propose those recommendations? Councillor Edson, seconded, Councillor Meek. So recommendations 1, 2, 3 together. Those in favour? Any against? Okay, that's carried. So we look forward to the town clerk with me as the mayor and the chair of community services, and being ready for that more detailed proposal or presentation come our August meeting. So thank you. Now we move back to, we were with the agenda, and we're moving to item 7. Back to 7A. And those people who've got printed reports in front of them, we're now on additional page 2 and 3. We're pleased to have Tony back with us from his long distance walk. But Adam or Tony, do you want to say something in presenting this?
I'm the clerk for the report.
Sorry?
Chair. I'm the clerk for the report, so I'll be presenting this report.
Yeah, right.
Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so, all right, so Asset's working group report, just by way of introduction to this report, I want to thank all the councillors and all the officers who over the last months have put in a tremendous amount of work to make this report possible. In fact, reports possible, because as you will have seen from reading the report presented this evening, because of the number of assets that we're talking about, they've been split into two sets, and we're going to consider some of the assets recommendations this evening, and we're going to consider the other assets recommendations at the August council meeting, just because we have lives and don't want to feel you're going to be here beyond any meeting limits to get all this necessary work done. But as it says within the report, the working party that was set up by full council have undertaken the task that was given them with support from the officers to basically look at a large number of the assets owned by the town council and over time, and with expert advice from, for example, our planning officer and our projects and facilities manager, form a view around recommendations to make to full council. And having been through all of the assets, these recommendations then fall into 6 groups of assets to consider. And as I say, 3 of those groups are coming to this meeting tonight. So 1.3 in the report, you can see the list of 6 groups listed, Group 1, consider sale of open market land for development. Group 2, investigate sale of land to immediate neighbours. Group 3, offer opportunity for local groups, residents, neighbours, etc. to undertake more activities on the space, basically. Group 4, explore opportunities to generate revenue. Group 5, no immediate action, but we may return to them in 2022. And Group 6, no further action is recommended for the, if you like, for the foreseeable future, if you like, until councillors wish to look at those assets again. So that's the 6 groups, and as I say, it's groups 1, 3 and 4 which are coming to the meeting this evening, and then groups 2, 5 and 6 will come to the August meeting. So if councillors, having reviewed the report, were thinking, what about, so-and-so assets, it means that that asset is on the other list, if you like, and will be in groups 2, 5 or 6 at the following council meeting in August. Okay. I think as well it's worth saying, as well as the expert advice that we've taken, we've also been very mindful of the neighbourhood plan in terms of any recommendations that have been made this evening. So Appendix A of the report, sorry I've scrolled the wrong way. Appendix A of the report is the table for the asset groups that I've described. And basically what we're going to ask you to do in a minute is we're going to basically go down the list and ask councillors to basically confirm or amend the recommendations for these assets in accordance with the motion for the meeting this morning. But just a couple of quick things before we do that. First of all, I wanted to highlight Group 3 and just say this greater community involvement is a fantastic, I think it's really a fantastic strategic opportunity for the council. The council is doing a lot of work, as we know, around being a more green council, including with the Climate Change Working Group, who are council meet chairs and are reporting this evening. A whole range of activities we're doing, such as Operation Pollinator on the golf course. And this really fits into that. In other words, there's lots of communities and community groups within the town who are taking action or want to take action in response to the climate emergency. And Group 3's assets is really our way of enabling more of that activity to happen by making more spaces available to these groups to undertake community activities that can support action against climate change. I think that's an amazing strategic opportunity for the council to take. Secondly, I wanted to say, we'll go down the table in a minute, but before we get onto the table and the list of asset by asset, I just want to check if there's any questions or points on the report as a whole before we go into Appendix A. Thank you. Anyone need to ask anything before we start going down them?
I think it's a very good thing that we split this into two agenda items and 2 separate meetings. This would make it more manageable. One very long agenda item.
Yeah, it would be one very long agenda.
So any questions about the process we're about to go through? Well, let's start with Appendix A, please.
Are you happy, Chair, for me to go down them one by one with the group?
Yes, I think otherwise it will be so complex to remember what we were agreeing. I think we take questions and resolve each site one by one. Okay.
So Group 1, and there's one asset for this group for this meeting, and that's a small piece of land on Broad Street to the rear of Boots the Chemist, and you'll see in the notes explaining the size of the land and any key issues for councillors to consider. Having looked at this land carefully, the Assets Working Group recommendations are to engage with a professional to ascertain best value and gain access on any access issues, advice on any access issues, as well as advice on the general saleability of the site. So really to take steps towards potentially being able to sell this piece of land. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments about that before or any amendments to the recommendation? Councillor Payne, come up.
Is this the piece of land that you can get through from Church Street to Broad Street, or is it just behind?
It's literally behind. So it's between the graveyard and Boots.
Oh, right. Okay.
Okay. All right. So if there's, what we'll do, Chair, is that there's the motion at the end asks councillors to approve this whole list with the recommendations. So I'm going to take any amendments to recommendations as I go, and then when I get to the end of the list, we'll go back and pass the motion so we have the list agreed, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So if there's no other comments or amendments on 1, then I'm going to go into Group 3, the first asset there, which is green space bordering Sandor Road. Sandor Road is a cul-de-sac that runs off Alfriston Road, I think it is, towards the Newlands site. And down the far end of that, quite close to Newlands, there's an area of green space behind a flint wall surrounded by houses. And so, as I say, small parcel of land here. And so, at the moment, it's a space that is not particularly well used by the local community, I would say. There's not a tremendous amount going on upon this green space, but because it's a beautiful small green space enclosed by flint walls, it would really lend itself to some community activity, we think. So that's why we're suggesting this is one of the pieces of land. And you'll see, going down the right-hand side of recommendations, you'll notice when you read the report, that for all the item 3, it's basically the same recommendation, which has offered as a green space for community use via heads of agreement, i.e. STC will maintain ownership of the land and enable community groups to deliver climate change work on the site. And the crucial last sentence, so councillors are clear, these decisions about enabling greater community use now does not affect the long-term options for the site. So it's not about bestowing it to the community forever, it's about enabling community activity on the site now while it's still owned by STC and future decisions can be made about it by STC. Have I explained that okay? Anyone got any questions about that? Because that's fundamental. Yes, Councillor.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know about the legalities of this kind of thing, but presumably it could be challenged that in future years somebody could say, well, a precedent has been set on this site over the last however many years for use as, say, a community garden. And then if a future council wanted to change that, there might be problems. I mean, I understand it's still in STC's ownership, but I just wonder if there's a legal position that one might want to investigate on that.
No, that would, well, the advice we've had is to draw up a heads of agreement with the relevant community group, and that's what we're going to do, as it says in the recommendation. And the heads of the agreement will include this clause to make that clear to everybody. The planning officer's advice is that should be sufficient to enable us to proceed. But I do take your point. Obviously, none of us are able to see sort of 20 years hence, if that makes sense. So it's about, as I say, this initial use does not change the situation, providing obviously, again, the group are happy to assign a heads of agreement that says that it's not affecting the long-term use of the site. Okay, any other questions, comments, etc. on Sandor Road? Councillor Warraven.
Similar question really to Councillor Meek. Will there be like a length of so many years? Because there will be like an investment by these community groups and they won't want to invest unless they're secure for a certain number of years. Thank you. Yeah,
no, that's an absolutely fair point. And again, we're taking the relevant advice about, again, within the heads of agreement, what term is sensible. In each case. So that's a very fair question. Okay, any other questions or comments on Sandor Road?
Councillor Payne.
Councillor Payne, come on.
On a general point, if we assign it to a particular group, is there any going to be a service level that they have to keep to? So they can't just sort of just leave it, or you might have 3 or 4 people really keen, they move on, and it becomes a wasteland.
That's again, as with the other 2 questions, that's a really fair question, and obviously very important for councillors to be considering that. I think that part of the heads of agreement idea is for the community group to essentially demonstrate its capacity to be able to do the things it says it wants to do, if that makes sense. So we're looking to make sure that capacity is agreed. I think at the same time it's worth acknowledging that there is an element of risk to these ideas, in the sense that obviously relying upon volunteer and community support, there are no absolute guarantees about that capacity having, longevity, if you like. But what we're hoping, though, is obviously bringing spaces back to life and getting great stuff happening there will actually encourage communities to get involved with them rather than, cause a falling away. But there are no guarantees about that, and I need to be clear about that. Okay. Any other questions or comments? I'll move on to the next one. That's all right. So Prince's Drive, large area of grassland between the roads there. So Prince's Drive is the road that runs. So basically, it's basically quite near the if you drive up from the Co-op roundabout within that newer estate that was built on the edge of what was then the area of outstanding natural beauty, when you get to the far end of that road, that is Prince's Drive, and there's a large area of open grassland there. And again, it's described in the notes here, including the relevant parts from the neighbourhood plan, making it very clear that there are restrictions upon any capacity to build upon that site that would need to be addressed or overcome if any further building was to be possible. At the same time, I think it's worth noting that the site is unfenced and has public roads on 3 sides of it. So there is community, people use that place all of the time, but there aren't many ball games or running dogs there or running children for that matter, because you have roads on 3 sides of the thing. There we are, exactly, absolutely. So, but on the lead, as it were. So I think again, we think part of this space could be, because it's quite a large space, could really offer opportunities for, again, whether it's community garden type activities or something similar on the site, or maybe community food growing. And we'd like to approach green groups in the town to see whether they might be interested. And also that at the same time, and this is a key point actually, and it comes up more than once within the report, councillors may well be aware, because there's been information about this project presented at previous meetings, but the Seaford Community Partnership are undertaking work to develop further Friends of Green Spaces projects, and they've indicated that one of the spaces they're looking to create of Friends of Green Spaces is for this particular green space, which would make it seem therefore to fit well with the motion that's presented to councillors this evening. Councillor Payne.
As I said when we had our very first meeting, I was against the wildflower project. Princess Drive, as they've done it now, has changed my mind.
Okay.
Because there's a nice green space where you can run, and kids do play there because there's kids living on the corner.
Yeah.
But you then got the pieces round the trees that have been left to go wild. And I think that's great.
Yeah.
Because remember my objection was you get covered with seeds and everything as you're walking through it.
Yeah.
And to me, Princess Drive is great as it is. Leave it alone.
Thank you. Okay, that's a fair point of view. Does anybody else? Chair, I don't know whether you want to vote for these item by item or whether we can take them together.
I think we could take them together, because it could take up. I think if we've got something that's contentious, we might park it to later.
Does anybody else have views on Princess Drive?
I think it's fair to say that by having another group working with us or taking it over from us, we would still want to be significantly influential about its use and how it's, the way in which you. And I understand that the groups that are these green groups are comprised of neighbours of these sites, so they are also people with a local view. So I think that.
Yeah, in many cases that's certainly the case, and again it says within the report. If that's
Councillor Lord.
Councillor Lord.
Green spaces. It's a very new thing set up by Health England, and we're going in the right direction to giving it to people in local communities. But what we have to do is to ensure via the town clerk that these spaces are managed correctly. Just by giving to some local people, enthusiasts, they don't know what they're doing, then we're going to make things matters worse than what they are. So I think what we should do, by all means, give them to local green space, greater green space to local communities, but make sure they're managed in accordance with a lot of criteria. And providing that is achieved, then I think we have a healthy environment. And I think it's very, very important that we adhere to these policies from Natural England, etc. And provided we do that, I think it's absolutely a brilliant idea. We shouldn't have to vote, we should just all agree to it.
Yes, I think our heads of agreement would do that.
Yes, and I think as we discussed, as was discussed at Asset Working Group, really, in terms of the heads of agreement report, and obviously as town clerk, I can work with councillors from the group as well as other officers with their expertise, such as planning officer, to make sure this heads of agreement has the content that we need from it. Okay. If there's nobody else on Princess Drive, the next one on the list is the East Martello Field, which is the far third field, largely unused at the moment, and also requiring access requirements for the Southern Water substation. But again, as with the previous space, the Sifa Community Partnership Cares project are hoping to use this space as part of one of their projects. Again, information about what's called the Cliff Gardens project has been brought to councillors at previous meetings. So this one, we're saying, obviously any steps would need to be, on the understanding of Southern Water's access being maintained. So clearly a commitment to liaise with the Southern Water as required would be necessary. But as I say, subject to this, again, we see this as another space where we could invite the community group to undertake the things they want to do on the site, again, subject to the heads of agreement, if that makes sense. Any comments on East Martello or questions on East Martello Field? Okay. And then the next one is the green space between Northway and Firle Road. And this is a green space which, although the neighbourhood plan did not designate it as a green space, in that it doesn't have that level of protection, if you like, but there are a group of local residents who've approached the council looking to create a Friends of Group to undertake green activities on the site. So again, given what's on the space now and the indication of the residents wish to do this, again, subject to the necessary heads of agreement and them having sufficient capacity to undertake the things they wish to do, again, we're proposing to add this space to the list of green spaces that we're offering up at this time in the way described. Any questions, comments, queries on this site? Okay, great. And then just to say there's two more. One is more by way of as information as anything else, really. Blatchington Pond has an existing Friends group. The Friends group is the East Blatchington Pond Conservation Society. But I've included them in this list because Blatchington Pond was one of the assets that's on the list of the Asset Working Group. But just to say, so the only action we're recommending here is just to make sure we've got all the necessary agreements up to date with the Pond Conservation Society and all is well with their work. We believe that it is. Okay, and then finally, the space that's called the Ridings. And again, there's very specific notes about this space from the neighbourhood plan that I think are worth noting. Again, at the moment, therefore, there's no, apart from some community use, dog walkers, etc., there's no other use of the site in the here and now. And again, this is one of the green spaces where the Seafront Cares project is looking to create the necessary Friends of Group. So in those circumstances, we're also adding this space to the list of assets under Group 3. That's the last asset under Group 3 for this meeting. Councillor Rutland, please speak.
One of the best assets of this town I can't see on that list, and that's our seafront.
Yes.
And one of the things that in Brighton they pay for parking, in Eastbourne they pay for parking. They don't pay for parking in Seaford. The number of campers that come down and park overnight on our seafront for nothing, that is a real asset to us. And if we charge for parking on our seafront, that is a huge revenue stream for this council. including the amount of people that are going to be coming to Seaford for staycations over the next couple of years. That is one of our biggest assets, and we haven't even looked at it.
I think that a number of councillors have raised the issue about paying for parking over the last few months, and it's clear, especially given the volume of visitors that were here during the period of summer last year when visitors could come, that it does seem there's a will within the council group to return to the issue, to return to looking at this issue. And so clearly that's something that will come to future meetings of the council.
I don't think we need to look at it. I think we need to get on with it. Everywhere else charges for parking. We don't. The number of campers on our seafront on a daily basis, that is a huge revenue stream which we are just wasting.
Okay,
Your comments have been heard, Councillor Rutland. Thank you.
Councillor Dunn, Councillor Everton.
Thank you, Chair. What I would like to say is, if you charge for parking on the seafront, it doesn't come to Seaford Town Council. It's owned by Lewis District and East Sussex. The money would go to them, not us. So we do not want to charge for parking on the seafront. We do not want to put more money in their jar. We don't want to have the residents that live in the side streets not have any parking, because then what we'll do is go, oh, our residents haven't got parking, let's do permit parking. And they'll be charged, and it will go to Lewis and East Sussex. We do not want this.
One at a time. Councillor Dunn and then Councillor Everton. Councillor Dunn.
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Just to say, I completely agree with Councillor Borman. We don't own all the parking on the seafront. There is only a section that we own. So any revenue that would be generated would go straight to Lewis District or East Sussex County Council, and then it would go into the wider pot. Where would we benefit from the revenue? Thank you.
Councillor Everton, I think this is the last representation I'll take on this, because it's not actually in this agenda. So we could come back to this in August, but I think for now it's not listed. Councillor Everton.
So we should move on from it, but also we can't do anything like parking on the seafront without public consultation, which is something that takes a period of time, because we can't make that decision for the residents. The residents need to decide whether they want to pay for parking on their own seafront or not.
I think I think we should move on. I think the officers and the rest of us have heard the issues explored, and I think we need to bring this back to another meeting. Something else. Okay, Councillor Meek. Yes?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to go back to the point that was raised about maybe voluntary groups not actually being responsible and looking after the assets that we might make over to them in a heads of agreement situation. I think you'll find that there's a huge movement afoot in Seaford, and that even if these groups as individuals aren't particularly adept at doing what they might intend to do, there's an infrastructure developing in Seaford through the CARES project, through Seaford Environmental Alliance, through Trees for Seaford, through On the Verge, Mini Meadows projects. There's a lot of expertise now coming forward to help people to do this, and I think you'll find that these groups like, for instance, what you mentioned, Blatchington Green and people who are very, very keen to get things going in their local spaces, they will get support from some of these other groups that are emerging and that we are partnering with. So I don't think there should be a big worry about whether people are going to drop out after a year or two and can't be bothered anymore. I think there is a movement progressing, and I don't think we should worry too much about that, because I think there's beginning to be that support network.
That's a good point about the context of this. It's not being done in isolation.
Okay, thank you, councillors, and really, let us say, it's great to have the frank discussion. And as I say, as was covered in terms of the parking issue, there will be council a time for that later in the council year, being mindful of the issues that everyone has expressed tonight, including, being clear with our community about what will be happening and when and how they'd be involved with that. So thank you, as I say. But meanwhile, this did almost segue into, though, list 4, which is assets where we think some revenue can be generated.
So just to be clear, we're on page 9 of the additional papers, if you're following.
Thank you, Chair. So there are 3 of these assets for this meeting tonight. One is the flower beds outside Morrison's on Pelham Road, and as I say, we wonder if there's potential sponsorship or other income opportunities here. We want to basically liaise with Morrison's and also see if the Chamber of Commerce may help around sponsorship. So those recommendations are there. Then secondly, the group have considered Seafront shelters and STC-owned bus shelters. And I think as the note makes clear, we want to explore if there are appropriate ways of generating income from these sites without, as I say, overly commercialising our seafront, for example. And I think that the recommendation here provides that balance to that approach. And then thirdly...
So before we move on, can we just check that the Morrison's flower beds and the seafront shelters and bus shelters were content with the recommendation as it is? Yes?
Yeah, I was going to take three together, but okay. I'm happy to take... I'll stop there. And any questions, comments, etc. on the first two, and then I'll move on to the third one. Okay, thank you. Thank you, Chair. And then thirdly, on Southdown Road, basically between Florence House and the View and the golf course is a patch of land that originally, a very long time ago, was an allotment site. And so this is a patch of land where the recommendation from the asset working group is that we enter into dialogue with South Downs National Park, because it's just within the national park, because the road is the boundary, to explore whether there are potential for basically what we might call pods or glamping on this site. One of the main reasons for choosing this site is its proximity to the View, and therefore, necessary things that people might need are there on their doorstep, basically, if they were to use this site. As I say, we're very aware that such opportunities need to be handled very sensitively and carefully, and South Downs National Park have a series of policies relevant to this that we would follow, and we would liaise with them as a first step before we would take this forward. But what the group is proposing is for that dialogue with South Downs to happen, necessary exploration and feasibility work to be undertaken, with a view to seeing if this could be a source of revenue for the Council in 2022. Any questions or comments on that recommendation? Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, and then Councillor Borman.
I think this was in the original plan for the Seaford Head Golf Course and the View. What I'd like to suggest is, instead of putting pods up there, why don't we put lodges up there that can be used 12 months of the year? I think that pods are very seasonal. I wouldn't want to stay in one in the middle of winter with a gale blowing over the Seaford Head.
Yeah,
thank you, Councillor Brown.
Councillor Brown, Councillor Borman.
Thank you. Yeah, I agree with Councillor Brown. But also, have we put a business plan together? Because if you've got, whether they're lodges, pods or anything, you will need someone to go in there after someone's left, to go clean it and everything. Yeah. So is there a business plan that's being put in place to look at the additional costs before we speak to South Downs National Park, in order to, is it actually acceptable? Is it actually a revenue income for us, or actually will it just balance even?
Okay, that's a fair point, and we can obviously make sure that happens.
I think also fair to say that the recommendation there is just to have a business case prepared that would take those kind of things on board.
Absolutely.
And it's likely it's going to be 2022. So
yeah, for the necessary work to be done. But as I say, just to make councillors clear that the potential for a piece of work is there, and I think it would be, again, given the work needs to be undertaken, we can be flexible about what may go on that site in terms of the source of revenue generation. As I say, in terms of what the council's views expressed in this meeting. Okay. Chair, I've got to the end of my list, so I might hand back to you if that's
Thank
okay.
you. We've gone all the way through Appendix A. That now brings us back to the recommendations on the report. So the council has recommended, 1, to note the report, and 2, to consider the list of assets in Appendix A and confirm or amend the recommendations in each case. So as I hear it, we've confirmed the recommendations in each of those cases. So would someone like to propose that we accept recommendations 1 and 2? Councillor Borman, seconded, Councillor Everton. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you.
Thank you.
Now we're going on to item 7B, which is the report of the Climate Change Working Group. And this is additional page 11, and I think we're back to our town clerk again.
Yes, Chair, I'll just get page 11 up and then I'll be ready to start. There we go. Again, I want to thank Councillor Meek and the other members of the Climate Change Working Group, again, for the significant volume of work that they've been undertaking, and also being able to move things forward sufficiently to bring a report to this meeting this evening. And again, I think that the report reflects the progress that's been made through the work of this working group, and now this, as I say, reporting back to full council. So there are 4 bullet points on the report in the appendix that's been presented to councillors this evening. First of all, a progress report on the Climate Day Eco Fair, a greener Seaford, which is taking place on the 1st of August. Secondly, that as connecting to the previous item, where the Climate Change Working Group have also been involved in helping to identify potential green spaces for community involvement, as we've just covered in the previous item. Thirdly, the groups, as councillors within the group have been clear to make sure they've been doing, when this group was created, it was given some work to do by the full council that created it. And that was really to undertake strategic work as well as operational work, if you like. In other words, working towards the council itself being able to have a strategic objective relating to climate change and an actions that would flow from that strategic objective. And the group are working on that so that that can fit into the strategic planning process the council will be doing over the later months of this year. And fourthly, just to inform council at this stage that clearly more and more of this work is coming within the remit of what we might describe as the mainstream work of the council. So the view of the members of the group is that they really need to, the group needs to evolve from a working group into something more formal and embedded within the mainstream work of the council, such as a committee or subcommittee. We think a bit more work and thinking is needed, including on how that will be resourced. And so a paper around those ideas and recommendations will come to the August full council meeting. Thank you. Happy to take questions, comments, etc. on the report.
Councillor Meek, as chair of the committee, do you have anything to say? Okay. Does anyone have any questions to ask of the clerk or the chair of the committee? No, I think in that case we move back to the recommendations. The full council is recommended to note the contents of the Climate Change Working Party's update report at Appendix A, and that also includes that we will have a report coming to the next council meeting on the ways to move this forward. So someone like to propose that recommendation? Councillor Verdun, someone second that? Councillor Walraven, those in favour? Okay, that's carried, thank you. We now move on to item 8. Outside body reports from representatives to outside bodies. Is there anyone who wants to speak to that item? Councillor Walraven.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick update on Bishopstone United Charities. One of the almshouses became vacant earlier this year, and we're pleased to say that we have got a new resident who moved in at the beginning of June. So other trustees who live in the village did a lot of work redecorating and getting it all ready for the new tenant. And I'm very happy here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else as an external body representative want to say something to the meeting? No, I think not, so thank you. And let's move on to item 9, which is the opportunity for district and county councillors to update us on what's happening in their fields and what we need to know about. I recognise that Councillor Carolyn Lambert's here and is asking to speak. Now, I've consulted with officers, and because Councillor Lambert is invited to speak in her official capacity as a county councillor, it's my view we don't need to suspend standing orders to allow her to speak. If anyone wants to put up an alternative to that, feel free. Okay, Councillor Lambert, the microphone's yours.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening, colleagues. It's lovely to be here. It does feel a bit like a trip down memory lane, I have to say. But I was absolutely thrilled to hear that the young mayor in particular, which was something I set up when I was mayor of Seaford, is still going strong, because it's such an important opportunity for young people in the town to get involved and get engaged with what we're all doing. Now, like you, the County Council has just had its first administrative meeting, at which we all worked out who was going to do what. So on a personal level, in addition to my work as ward councillor for Seaford South, I have been re-elected as Vice Chair of East Sussex Fire Authority. It is fire and rescue that is my primary concern, alongside my ward issues. I think rather than for me to, as it were, tell you what I think you might want to hear, I'd rather use this as an opportunity for you to question me about anything the County Council is involved in Seaford that you are concerned about. If I can answer it tonight, I will. If not, I'm happy to take anything away. And I will just conclude by saying that I've had a very, very positive meeting with your town clerk a few weeks ago, and we have between us, I think, got quite a comprehensive shopping list because a lot of what we want to do in the town, I think, between us does require joint working between all three councils. So I very much look forward to continuing to work with the town clerk and with all of you.
Okay, thank you. Perhaps you'd stay at the microphone. Does anyone have questions to ask of our county councillor? And as to say that I'm hopeful going forward with our main meetings this year that we'll have an opportunity to have county and district councillors talk with us about to engage at the three levels of 3 tiers. I think Councillor Brown, perhaps Councillor Lambert, perhaps you'd like to move to the other microphone, and Councillor Brown would like to go to that one. And this means for sure that whoever asks to speak next will be on that side of the room. But
It's a pleasure to see Councillor Lambert here this evening. Thank you so much for coming to our meeting. Could we have an update on the progress on Exeter Bridge, please?
Dear me, yes, what a good question. Well, I have just been informed in the last couple of weeks that, in fact, the funding is not in place to replace the bridge, which is, I think, going to be a huge disappointment to a number of people in Sifa, because we have been being promised all along that we would be replacing the bridge. I am preparing an update for my monthly newsletter. The town clerk gets a copy of that, so I'm very happy that he will circulate that for you. But it is a matter of concern. I did meet with officers, it must be a good 2 years ago now, when the plans were just being developed. And one of the things I did bring up then was my personal concern about looking at that whole area holistically, because if you're going to carry out the proposals as they currently are and replace the bridge with a 2-lane crossing, then that will have, in my view, a potentially quite serious impact further down, particularly towards the Cookmere crossing, where I'm sure you're as aware as I am, if you go on the bus, the whole kind of bus empties and people throw themselves across the road to try and get to the Cookmere. So there's still a lot of thought, I think, that needs to go into that project, but certainly at the moment, the funding is not in place to do the bridge as currently proposed.
Okay, Councillor Borman. This is going to be it's a new councillor's game we could play.
Yeah, can I ask for an update on Talon Parade, especially as East Sussex County Council issues the licence for the scaffolding, please?
You can indeed. Again, I put a very full update in my June newsletter, The town clerk has that, and I'm very happy that he circulates, if not the whole newsletter, certainly that bit, because it's very detailed. I've set out exactly what each council is responsible for, and I'm currently actively working with officers from both councils on a whole range of issues that have been raised in connection with Talon Parade. As we all know, it's a toxic and long-standing issue. It's been going on since 2008, and all of us who live in Seaford, I think, are desperate to see the back of the scaffolding skyscraper. So yeah, the town clerk is very welcome to circulate that, and I will be putting further updates into the newsletter as I work with officers.
Councillor Dunn.
Yes. That's all right. I've got my own one. Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor, sorry, Mr. Mayor. Yes, Councillor Lambert, is there any chance that you could go back and sort of revisit the parking issue that happens between the two fields in Cricketfield Road? Because when we get a lot of visitors, the Martello fields, when we get a lot of visitors, people park along there, and disabled people, buggies, you name it. And a couple of weeks ago, when we had one of our hot spells, the bank holiday, there was so much traffic there that there was a fire up near Corsica, or at the back of Corsica Hall, and the fire engine had a great deal of difficulty getting through to address the fire. So, lives and homes could be put at risk. So thank you.
I absolutely understand that. That's one of the things that the town clerk and I have on our extensive shopping list. So it was very interesting to hear the number of comments coming from the room today. So yes, certainly that's one of those issues that will require tripartite working. So, yeah.
Okay, so thank you, Councillor Lambert. Councillor Lambert has offered the opportunity for people to be in contact with her by email beyond the meeting. So it's not a one-time opportunity. This is a good engagement going forward. So congratulations on being re-elected. So I think we can... are there other councillors, district councillors in the room who wish to speak? Councillor Borman.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, coming up to Cabinet next week is the community grant schemes, which will be opened, if agreed, which likely will be agreed by Cabinet, for community groups to apply for funding and grants between August and October, especially in mental health and biodiversity, using the outside to support mental health. So I'm sure there are lots of groups in Seaford that could benefit from applying for that funding. Mm-hmm. Also, I've had lots of emails, and it's been brought to many people's attention about plastic recycling. That supposedly it goes overseas and gets disposed of in seas and in land and things. What I do want to say is Viridor, who is Lewis District's contractor, they work with licensed facilities that adhere to strict environmental procedures. All plastic is reprocessed into plastic pellets or flakes, which is then reused and manufactured as a recyclable material. None of anything that's collected from Seaford, Lewis District, is sent overseas. Thank you, Chair.
That's good to hear. Anyone else? Any of the other either of the other district councillors? Oh, sorry, Councillor Turner. And congratulations on being recently elected, I think.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, councillors. I'd just really like to introduce myself. I'm Richard Turner. I'm the new District Councillor for Seaford East. I'm also on Ringmer Parish Council. I'm sorry that I don't live in Seaford. I live in Glynde. I have had previous experience of being on the district. I was on the district for 4 years up to 2019, representing Ringmer and Ouse Valley. I was on the planning committee for 4 years. I'm now back on the planning committee. So I'm interested in anything that any of you guys have got going on in Seaford, and I'm just pleased to be here and introduce myself. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for joining us, and please do come and see us regularly.
I will endeavour to do so.
Okay, I think that brings us to the end of that agenda item. No one else flagging to speak. Okay, let's move on. I think there are no, other than hearing the reports, there's no action beyond that. Can we move on to agenda item 10, which is page 17, the Town Clerk's update report.
Thank you, Chair. I followed my usual format in the report in terms of, for the purposes of transparency, show councillors the main areas of work that's been undertaken and the progress under each of them, and then each meeting provide an update. The updates are labelled new, and for those with colour printers or watching on screen are also green as opposed to black ink, so they hopefully stand out. But as I've said, as I say in this report, it's only a month since our last full council meeting, so there may be matters within the rest of it that you want to make sure you've covered as well, if that makes sense, because, but as I say, this gives transparency, accountability and comprehensiveness. So I'll cover the main green items and anything else that's worth saying tonight. I wanted to begin, as I say, by echoing the welcome and congratulations for our new young mayor and deputy young mayor, and great to be working with them over the year ahead. I also want to say on a personal note, it's the first report since I've passed my probationary period. I want to thank all the councillors and officers for their fantastic support to myself in my first 6 months in post. And also thank you for confirming me in the role. I can't emphasise enough, as it says in the report, what a pleasure it is to work with you all and for our town, and how honoured I am to hold this post going forward. In terms of key pieces of work, I've talked about green spaces, and we've covered this actually already because this report comes after the report of the Assets Working Group. So you've already voted that through this evening in terms of following up the work of the Climate Change Group and Assets Working Group around green spaces within the town. I've confirmed that the staycation work that was agreed by full council in March is reporting regularly to Community Services Committee, and there will an update report going to the 14th of July meeting. Moving on, I want, in terms of the Martello Toilets, to say we're working to put together the necessary information the lottery need for the updated version of the application. And meanwhile, as you know from the last meeting, we've had a change of architects, and the great news is we had an amazing response, 11 applications. Our project facilities manager worked incredibly hard to make sure we got the message out there and to liaise with 11 potential candidates. They've all been assessed, their applications have all been assessed, and we're in conversations with a potential appointee this week, so we hope to have official news of that very soon. In terms of the COVID restrictions, we've got the physical meetings discussion coming up at this meeting tonight. And also, just in terms of the green work that we're doing, on item 3.2, I've also highlighted some other recent developments, such as we have a new concession at High and Over, which is also a bicycle repair facility there as well. So we've got lots of cyclists converging on that site with their bikes and also getting them maintained and improved while they're there, which is fantastic. And also, as councillors know, we do a tremendous amount of work around ecology and environment on the golf course that we are custodians and owners of. And as well as being part of Operation Pollinator, we've also signing up for something called On Course, which is basically ecological management of your golf course systems as well. So again, amazing work. And just to say, by the by, councillors will know we put the borehole in last year for water supplies to the golf course, and so far in 2021, none of the water, all of the water for the course has come from the borehole, and none of it from the public mains, which I think is a fantastic achievement for the council. So amazing work going on the golf course. As I say, I've covered the considering of physical meetings and what we do going forward once the roadmap moves on again, and also you've heard this evening from Dr. Pope from Historic England, so in terms of, say, we're working with Historic England. And just to say, by the by, there's one more item to add on Historic England this evening, which is, as well as the potential investigation that Dr. Pope described on Zoom to you earlier this evening, because of the erosion of the cliff and now the proximity of the Iron Age fort to the cliff edge, Historic England keep a register of historic assets at risk. and they update it every year. So they're going to be adding the Iron Age fort at Seaford Head to that national list of assets at risk. That comes out every November. So in November, we may well get some publicity about the fact that the Iron Age fort has been added to that list, especially as the cause of it is cliff erosion relating potentially to climate change. So that's something, again, to have on our radars. Just to say, but also to be clear, decision-making about whether something's an asset at risk or not is entirely a matter of Historic England and nothing to do with us. But obviously, councillors should be aware of that asset going onto that register. I've covered Talon Parade in the report as well because of a very useful discussion at Planning and Highways Committee, and the statement on our own website has been updated to reflect that, and obviously Councillor Lambert talked about that as well. Councillor Lambert also talked about Exeter Bridge, and also previously councillors have raised around disability parking within the town, and we are taking a paper on that to Planning and Highways and also seeing how that connects to work of the Community Services Committee as well. And two final things. One, it was great to be part of the Over the Rainbow Walk, so thank you, Councillor Cash, for amazing work in helping to make that happen. But a brilliant afternoon was had by all. Thank you to Karen, also Jeff, our planning officer, who was part of the officer team with me. And just to say, when we walked up and down, as those doing the walk will know, we walked up and down the seafront. We went from Splash Point to the Sailing Club and then back again. And this was a fantastic opportunity to see what the seafront's like, see how's life on the promenade, and I think to see, in fact, the success of the balance the council is achieving with the concessions that we have now. Well, we have sufficient concessions and variety of concessions for great stuff for visitors and residents when they come to the seafront, but it's a balanced approach, and there aren't too many. And you really get a really good sense of that when you walk the full length of the seafront. So I think the work that the council's office have been doing around what we have in that space, I think that's done a good job, and we're getting the balance right. I saw that for myself on the walk. Okay, there's one additional item that's not in the report, which is an update from our planning officer, which is about housing, and I'm just going to literally read it out. It's called Housing Delivery in the Lewis District. This is a trailer for the next Planning and Highways Committee, effectively. But just to say, as many councillors will be aware, but the Town Council has been given advance notification by Lewis District Council of the publication of its housing 5-year supply position statement. What's happening is the government has imposed a 602 dwelling annual requirement for the parts of the district outside the national park, 782 altogether, to apply for 5 years. The government's target is based purely on housing need, with no consideration being given on the ability of the district itself to provide sufficient land. In its position statement, the District Council is confirming that, as expected, the residential land available will only cover 2.9 years of the 5-year requirement. So government planning policy takes the failure to meet the 5-year requirement has implications for the neighbourhood plan, and considerations to be taken into account on new residential applications. And therefore, obviously, as a town council, we need to consider this quite seriously, and therefore this will be an agenda item on the Planning Highways Committee on the 7th of July. But the reports around this item will be circulated to all councillors to give them an opportunity to comment on these developments. That's the end of my Town Clerk report. Happy to take any questions or comments.
Thank you. Any questions to the Town Clerk? And I think I'd like just to reinforce the point. It's a very good thing. He's passed out of his probation and he's with us fully. Yes, a round of applause, I think.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, somebody put a hand up. Councillor Meek.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Town Clerk, for, as usual, a very erudite and complete assessment. I just wanted to ask that we could have some reassurance. I'm very glad to know that you've had so many architects apply for to do the Martello Toilets. I just want an assurance that huge consideration will be given to sustainability and environmental criteria, such that a lot of maybe things like photovoltaics could be included, things like that, and also possibly on the continent they have self-cleaning toilets, which could be a huge asset for us. Although more expensive, It means you won't have to have people cleaning the toilets all the time. So once someone's been in, the toilet automatically cleans itself, either with an O3 system, which is an ozone system, or something like that. But these are things that we should look at, I think, for our sustainability programme. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Those points are noted. And just to assure Councillor Meek, actually, in terms of the selection of the architect, environmental considerations were a key part of that decision-making process, and the architects will be, we're looking to see what can be done within the funds available to do all the environmental measures that we can within the build. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Dunn.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, this is 2.6D regarding the offer of the Martello Fields to local charities for raising revenue through temporary additional car parking. Can we have an update on that? Have you had much response from charities to do this on the seafront? Thank you.
Yeah, we've had some response. Discussions are taking place with potentially interested parties. I can't announce anything yet. But we're reasonably confident that there will be some charities taking up this activity by the end of the summer. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. If there are no more questions, we move to the recommendation, which is to note the contents of the report. Someone propose that for me? Councillor Walraven, seconded by Councillor Meek. Those in favour? That's carried. We now move across to item 11. And this is presented by Karen. Yes?
Thank you, Chair. Item 11 forms part of the next three reports, which are all to do with the what we call the AGAR, which is the Annual Governance and Accountability Return. They are in the specific order that's prescribed to us. The first one's to do with internal audit. It's just for noting. The first part of it is the internal audit report, which is on the AGAR. That's signed by our internal auditor, Mark Mulberry. And Mark Mulberry, the internal auditors, have actually agreed that the accounts are such that the statement of accounts in agenda item number 13 is prepared correctly and that is ready to be signed. The second appendix to this report is our internal auditor's report. So slightly different names, very different items. Some of it can be a bit difficult to follow in the second report, but please bear in mind it does include two reports over the year. So where it says some things haven't been done, if you look later, actually they have been done. So the other recommendation is to approve the appointment of Mark Mulberry for another year as our internal auditor. I'd be happy to take any questions that anybody has on this report.
So anyone with questions? Councillor Brown.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. I'd like to recommend this report to Council, and I'd also like the councillors to note just how far we've come in the last couple of years, bringing our finances under control and getting the council back into the black. And I'd like to thank the finance team on behalf of the councillors.
Yes, good. Any other comments or questions? No, I think we can move on to the recommendations. And Karen, have you anything else to say, or that was fully?
No, Chair.
I think we could take these three recommendations together. Councillor Brown proposing the three together. Someone second that? Okay, that's Councillor Borman. All those in favour? That's carried. Thank you. And we're moving on to item 12, which is the annual governance statement. And back to Karen again.
Thank you, Chair. The annual governance statement also forms part of the AGAR. The whole of the AGAR is actually part of this report because it should be viewed as one document. The AGAR, basically, the annual governance statement basically says that we follow good corporate governance practices in our accounts and the way that we do business. It's explained quite considerably in the report, and again, I'd be happy to take any questions that members have got.
So questions on report 12 or agenda 12 between pages 46 and 58. Any questions, comments? No, I don't see any. Okay, so we have two recommendations in front of us. Council's recommended to agree that, to the best of its knowledge and belief, it has complied with all assertions in the annual government statement for the year ended 31 March 2021. And number 2, to approve the annual government statement for the year ended 31st of March 2021, which is in this report, Appendix 1, page 4, and to authorise the Chair and Town Clerk to sign Section 1 of the Annual Governance and Accountability Return, the AGAR, on behalf of the Town Council. Should we take those two together? Someone propose that? Councillor Brown? Together. Councillor Cash is seconding that. Okay, so recommendations 1 and 2 together. Those in favour? Okay, that's carried. Agenda item 13, we're now up to page 59. Karen?
Thank you, Chair. This is the final report that relates to the AGAR. And I would just like to make one change to it, Chair, because I think it's just a typo that recommendation number 1 shouldn't be there. It's actually the same recommendation as you've just approved on agenda item number 12. Okay. For the other resolutions, this is the statement of accounts as we're prescribed to do, complete every year. And it has to be signed by the Chair, and it has to be the last one to be considered. Again, I think there's lots of information in the report, and I'd be happy to take any questions, but I'd just like to say that I think it's been a great achievement that where we started in the beginning of the year with 184,000 in general reserves to now have 312,000 in general reserves and another 312,000 in earmarked reserves. As you can see from paragraph 3, I did manage, after agreement with Council, I did actually manage to earmark £49,000 worth of underspends in the budget that actually can be used as contingency sums going forward, and hopefully we can build those up year on year so that we don't have to budget for unknown things. We'll already have the reserves behind us to be able to go ahead and precept a little bit less in years to come. And I don't think we ever expected to be 312,000 in general reserves at the end of the year. We actually thought it might be less. So actually to get here, I think you know, it's an achievement for officers, it's an achievement for councillors, everybody who sort of, you know, did their best to make sure that we'd be in a good financial position at the end of the year. And I'm very pleased with the final position. So if there are any questions, I'd be happy to take them.
Any questions? I think I'd like to reiterate the point that Councillor Brown made earlier on, that our position has improved significantly. And I think also to make the point with well-written and comprehensive reports, it's easy to actually read them before the meeting and come with good understanding rather than have to, I think the absence of questions doesn't mean the absence of interest, but just simply the questions have been asked while we're reading our way through the report. And that was to give you long enough to think of a question. Councillor Brown?
Sorry, guys, but I'm in finance, as you know. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. If you read paragraph 5, conclusion 5.1, you'll notice in that paragraph that we're now £312,702 in the general reserve, which I think is very commendable, and also £312,138 in earmarked reserves. So that makes a total there of over £600,000 that we've got in our finances at this particular moment. Well done, the finance team.
Yes, well done indeed. So we come back to the recommendations now, except we're going to vote on recommendations 2, 3 and 4 because we carried recommendation 1 in an earlier report. So the Council is recommended to approve Section 2 Accounting Statements 2021, which is the resolution, to authorise the Mayor as Chair of the Town Council to sign Section 2 of the 2021 Annual Governance and Accountability Return on behalf of the Town Council, and to note the earmarked reserve movements capital receipts and expenditure for the year. So you're content for us to take those three together, 2, 3 and 4? Together, that's Councillor Brown, seconded by Councillor Rutland. Okay, all those in favour? That's carried, thank you. Again, well done to the finance team. Now we're on to item 14, and who's presenting this?
Tony, do you want me to do this, or are you happy to do this? Okay, please feel free to step in.
Okay, we're on page 88, if you follow it.
So I'm happy to speak, but as I say, it's, please be clear, I'm presenting the work of others in terms of any credit. So item 14 is Seaford Town Football Club lease renewal. The current lease expires at the end of this calendar year, so clearly we want to renew that. And the proposal before councillors this evening is for a long-term lease arrangement with the football club for the reasons that are explained within the report. The report hopefully gives councillors the information you need for this work to be taken forward, including the work of the football club as described in Appendix A. And there are 2 recommendations this evening, basically for councillors to indicate that they are happy for these negotiations to proceed, and then to give delegated authority for the relevant officers to undertake them, with the proviso we will come back to councillors if there are any issues that need to come back to council for resolution. Okay, happy to take any questions or comments and hand back to Chair for
Councillor Borman.
Vote.
Thank you, Chair. Obviously, 6 months or so ago, we renewed the rugby clubs on a 50-year lease in order for them to apply for longer-term funding. So, fully happy to support the Seaford Town Football Club having this. They do so much for the local community off their own back. So, one thing I would like to ask is, obviously, there is an increase in the rent. This obviously isn't going to stay like that for the next 50 years. How often is it going to increase? And is there a percentage yearly, or is it every so many years? Thank you, Chair.
Tony, I think those are the answers to that one.
Thank you, Chair. We do have it in the lease that it will increase year on year. I think based on a base rate, I think at about 3%, so it will go up and up and up. In 50 years' time, you won't be able to buy a Mars bar.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony.
Any other questions? Yeah, let's go back to the recommendations then. The council has recommended to consider approving a 50-year lease to the Seafront Town Football Club for the football clubhouse at the Crouch, and to delegate to the projects and facilities manager, in consultation with the proper officer, the power to agree terms of the lease with all councillors electronically before finalising, where consensus is achieved. If consensus cannot be achieved, this will be brought back to full council. So can we take those 2 together again? Yes, someone proposed this. Councillor Borman, I think seconded Councillor Edson. All those in favour? Okay, that's carried. And now we move on to the item 15, which is the Seaford Beach Guide 2021.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So there are 2 items within this. There's the updating of the revised Seaford Beach Guide for 2021, and also the preferred swimming zones trial, which is a really important piece of local work. Our project facilities manager has been a key person within discussions between if you like, swimmers and fishers and people who fish in the town. And we're looking to see if there are sensible ways of encouraging, if you like, everyone to be able to enjoy the space, if that makes sense. And I think the report outlines the reasons why this work is helpful, and the progress that's been made so far. As the report says, this is a trial. Has no legal there's no legal enforcement or anything like that. We're simply trying to encourage the sharing behaviours rather than going any further than that. So we're not. So we need to be clear as well about what this means and what it doesn't mean, if that makes sense, in terms of the trial going forward. So again, happy with Tony's support to answer any questions or comments that people have on this report. Councillor Meek.
Pages 91 and 98, Councillor Meek.
Thank you, Chair. Looking at the for instance, of the Seaford Beach Guide, it seems to say 2020 on it. I don't know if that's a mistake or whether are we looking at the last year's version. If you look at the...
Yeah.
It should surely say 2021.
Tony's behind you.
You're accurate in what you said.
We showed the 2020 brochure as an example of what we did last year. The new brochure is being worked on as we speak, and that's what we're discussing now. And it will have, hopefully, the amendments of the preferred beach areas on it as well.
Okay, thank you, Tony. Any other comments? Councillor Dunn?
Yes, thank you, Mr Mayor. Yeah, this is 1.9, says subject to agreement from all parties. It is hoped to have... Oh, sorry, I've got the wrong one, have I? Oh, yeah, it's hoped to have the beach guide and flyers ready for the end of June. But it said about the anglers that it need approval from sort of both areas, from the anglers and the swimmers. I know they were sort of at loggerheads. Are they both in agreement now to what's being proposed? Thank you.
Tony?
Yes, is the easy answer to that. They've both seen a draft of the brochure which came out this week, and both are happy to give it a trial and see how it goes this year and review it.
Yeah, I think there's benefits to both sides on doing this.
Thank you, Tony.
Okay, so no further questions. We come... Councillor Dunn. Payne, sorry.
I'm not quite sure it's linked, but I did notice that Seaford Lifeguards haven't applied for a grant this year. I don't know if anybody's talked to them to make sure they are still going to be doing the role. Because obviously, especially with staycation, it is really something vital we need doing in Seaford.
It's either going to be lifeguards on the beach this year. Is that...
Yes, there are, but it may be in a bit of a reduced capacity this year. The reason being is they haven't been able to train new people to, and they have to renew their licence, a lot of the people in the lifeguards every year, and they haven't been able to have access to swimming pools over the winter to be able to do the relevant training and whatever. But yes, they will be there as they were the year before last. And those details are in the new brochure where safe areas to swim are between where the flags go up when the lifeguards are there.
And can we do something to boost them now, rather than, is it a question of funding? They need to
I don't think it's a question of funding. I think it's a question of how many physical lifeguards they have.
Right.
The issue seems to be the inability to provide training in the winter because of COVID, therefore fewer people trained and available.
It's about an 8-week training course. So if they started one now, by sort of mid-August, we'd have more lifeguards.
I'm sure Tony could take that to discuss with them.
I could have that discussion with them, of course, yes. Yeah.
I know they've missed the deadline for a grant, but maybe we could make an exception to find some money to help with their training.
I think they've not asked for money, so we ought not to be reconsidering grants at this point, but I do take your point. Councillor Walraven.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Seaford Lifeguards, it doesn't take just a few months to train any new lifeguard. It takes a couple of years. It's not, to get them up to the standard they have to be. Seaford Lifeguards are renowned throughout the country, and as I say, it's not as much as for the funding. It is having volunteers coming forward, youngsters, and going through the training programme.
Okay, thank you for that
as I
explanation.
say, to get somebody now, start training, they won't be ready this year. Sorry? Yeah.
No, I think it's fair to say that lifeguards would deploy everybody they've got, and that the constraint is on how many trained people they have available. Yeah. And I think that's the limit. It's not licensing who they've got, but in terms of having enough of them. Yeah. Okay, thank you. That's explained that. I think we come back to the recommendations. Council is to consider supporting the revised Seaford Beach Guide for summer 2021 and to note and support the proposed preferred swimming zones trial. Someone propose that for me? Councillor Borman, someone second that? Councillor Rutland, all those in favour? Okay, that's carried. We're now going to item 16, which is the Parliamentary Boundary Review 2023.
Yeah, obviously the ATC is not able to come to these meetings, so I will be presenting this paper tonight. And just to say, to be clear what the motion is, essentially we're giving this meeting an opportunity to raise any points they would wish to have included in a response from Seaford Town Council to this consultation on parliamentary boundary review. So that could be any points that are raised tonight, but also we will circulate a draft response to this consultation to councillors for any opportunities for further comment. So don't feel that the next 10 minutes is your only chance. But I want to just to make, because I wasn't sure that was absolutely clear in the motion, that was the actions we're going to be taking. So I think the report is pretty much, covers what the government is the reasons behind the proposals and what the proposals are, especially obviously for the parliamentary constituency within which Seaford finds itself. So that's all explained within the report. And so really we wanted to bring this to a meeting. So if there's any points that councillors wanted to say within the meeting, very happy to take them now. But also, as I say, we'll then make sure a response is sent into the consultation. Thank you.
The report shows that in 1.1 that the deadline for this is the 2nd of August, but clearly we'd have to have time to write the response before then. So I'm imagining we would need a deadline for councillors last week in July, third week in July, something of that sort?
Yes. So 21st of July, there you go. That's a date.
Okay, any questions about the report as it is, so that we've got opportunities to discuss this with the clerk or other officers going forward? Okay, let's no comments. Okay, let's move to...
Councillor Payne wishes to speak, Chair.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, microphone, please.
Do you mean have we got any comments about the proposals or any comments about the report?
Well, what the report itself and the proposals in the report?
Right, okay. Because I've just really got one in the report. They're proposing to call it Lewis County. Would that not get confusing with the county council? And would it not be better, seeing as Seaford and Newhaven are over 50% of the population, it would be called Seahaven?
That's certainly a fair point. We can make sure we include that in the response. Thank you, Councillor Payne.
Anyone else? No? Okay, let's go back to the recommendation. The full council is recommended to consider the proposals and forward a response to the Boundary Commission for England. And we've now agreed on a deadline for councillors to respond by the 21st of July so that we can be clear and have a response in by the 2nd of August. So with that recommendation as written, recommendation number 1, someone proposed that? Councillor Payne, seconded. Councillor Brown, all those in favour? Okay, thank you. That's carried. Item 17.
Thank you, Chair. I want to thank the Executive Support Officer for the work that she's put into the paper that's presented to you this evening. As the paper says, following the decision of the government for physical meetings to return, such as what we're in right now, and the councillors when that was happening, 27th of April, it's in the report, decided to hold meetings in this space for the period up until at that stage until the end of July. Very interesting background noise going on. Is it something I said? Yeah, I was going to say. I hope it's not the Kirkmere River. Anyway, can you still hear me all right above the noise? Okay, I'll keep going if that's okay. Just to say that... That's it. Okay, how's that? Shall I keep talking? And then, yeah, can everyone hear me? Everyone hear me okay? Good, excellent. All right. So where was it? Okay, so 27th of April, we'd be meeting here. But that was agreed as a temporary measure to meet the roadmap requirements as of that time. And as the report covers, as we all know, the original roadmap timetable has been put back 4 weeks into to the 19th of July. So councillors really had already decided to be in this meeting room up until the end of July, to cover for the roadmap timetable. And really now the question is what to do after that. Within the report, we have 3 options to consider. This is actually, if you like, the 3 best ways this decision can be made, and then once we've decided how we're going to make the decision, then through that mechanism, the appropriate decisions will be made. So we're not deciding in this meeting what we're going to do. We're deciding how best to decide, if that makes sense, and also what temporary arrangements to have while we do that. I hope I've explained that okay.
Page 14, and it's item 1.7 on page 14.
Thank you, Chair. So the 3 options are, 1, to convene a further full council meeting in mid to late July to consider what to do next, basically so we can wait until the roadmap achieves it happens on 19th of July or later, if that makes sense. So convene an additional council meeting. Number 2, extend these arrangements until the end of August, and then use the full council meeting that is in August to decide on what to do next. Or option 3, to delegate power to relevant officers and councillors as described to make the necessary next decisions. Okay, and again, helpfully within the report, pros and cons and also costs of each of these 3 options are laid out for you within the paper. So councillors have been given 3 possible ways to proceed. The rest of the report also says that if you choose the 3rd option, you might want to give those deciding some criteria to use or consider in making that decision. So that's the last part of the report, is covering things you might want to recommend if you take the 3rd option of the 3 options that you have. So, I hope I've explained that successfully. Yes. Happy to take questions and comments, and obviously general comments before moving towards the choice.
So questions about what's written in the report as is, and questions or suggestions about what might need to be added if 1.7c was taken. Any comments or questions? Councillor Dunn.
Yes.
And then Councillor Borman.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Regarding option B, that booking this facility, Seaford Baptist Church, if we go for the other options and Seaford Baptist Church can get very, very full up with other events that they do hold, would we miss out on booking the church if it's required, where the view might still not be an adequate space? Is that been taken into consideration? Thank you.
Sorry, Councillor Dunn. Do you mind repeating the question? I just want to make sure I've understood it correctly.
I think it's if the church was to fill up with other bookings and and the town council hadn't got spots reserved, would we not be able to continue to use the space?
Okay, so what you mean, we're just concerned we might not be able to use the space. Is that what the question is?
If the council hadn't booked in advance.
Yeah. Okay, well, I think that's the reason for option B, is to enable us to do that till the end of August if we want to. Is that right?
Yeah. Yes, item B would do that. Councillor Meek.
Thank you, Chair. I think that B is a slightly misleading, because it seems to me that what it says, one of the cons cancels out the pro, if you sort of mean, or the other way around, because it says that if we book the hall, then if we want to cancel it, there's no cost. But on the other hand, the con says that it commits us to a £555 expense, but actually it doesn't, because we could cancel it before then if we wanted to. Is that my understanding, or am I getting that wrong?
No, you haven't. I think I take those points, and I suppose the con is saying that if we then proceed with having the meetings, that's what the cost is going to be. That's what we're trying to say, isn't it?
Councillor Borman.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I would go for a mixture of B and C. So B, we book the hall to August, so we're guaranteed it. Obviously, we can cancel. But then C, with proper officer and the CCMG in discussion, actually, we could cancel them if things open up better. But if not, then we have still got until August to be here. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Borman. People might want to do that.
Mm. So I think so that looks to be a proposal that we take B and C together.
Yeah.
So that would then, of the options, we've got option A or B and C together. Is that right?
I think so. Yeah.
Okay, so I need to make it clear I need to abstain on this. As a member of the church, I've got an interest in this. So how do we come at this? I suppose we could say, we can understand that what Councillor Borman's is proposed as an amendment to the recommendation, and the amendment is to take B and C together.
Yeah, so should we sorry, Chair, do you want to, would there be a seconder for Councillor Borman's proposal perhaps? Would that be how to proceed?
Lots of hands up, so
there we go.
Let's have
Okay, I
Councillor
think that's how to proceed then.
We've got Councillor Argent's name down tonight, so let's have Councillor Argent. So the amendment then is that we adopt B and C together.
Yeah.
Yes?
Okay.
Those in, we've proposed and seconded. Those in favour?
Those in favour of that. That's
okay. That's carried.
That's carried.
Okay, thank you. That brings us to the end of the agenda. It leaves me, the Town Clerk, to have a couple of things to sign before we go home, but the meeting is closed at 8:56.
Thank you, everyone.